All right, well, welcome everyone to this next edition of 30 Minutes with a Hacker. My name is Jade Whitty. I'm a Solutions Development Manager with Tech Data. And on the line, we have a number of engineers/hackers, Brett Scott, Josh Hart, John Gardner, Daniel Seth. And with us today as a guest appearance is Monreal Consulting out of Wickliffe, Ohio. And specifically have Darren, Bakula, and Ryan LaGanke that are on the call with us. So we're really happy you guys could make it. You're one of the top security partners out there that's out there fighting the battle along with us. So glad to have you on. Today's topic is around operational management. And it really gets into the idea of patching and kind of changing the philosophy. We all hear about patching is important, but really how you are approaching it is critical. And to kind of set the table a little bit further, I'm going to kick this over to Darren from Monreal to talk a little bit more about this and what you're seeing out there in the marketplace.
Thanks, Jade. I just like to talk about some of the issues that we're seeing out there with our customers, some of the stuff that we're seeing, some of the issues they're seeing behind the management portion of their business. Like say a customer comes in, comes over to us, they already had some systems installed years ago. They don't have the staff to properly manage them. And we actually see this as a huge opportunity for us to come in and actually start doing some business with them and then grow into other segments of the business. So we see like, let me give you an example that maybe we see this, like someone was sold firewalls to a SMB in the last few years, and they don't have a dedicated security team or even a dedicated security personnel, just someone who can actually like maybe hop on, pop a new rule in when needed, but they're not looking at some of the IPS data coming back. They don't know how to correlate it. We're seeing that they're not even getting properly alerted. So they have all these systems that they have, but they don't have the proper management around them. And we just see that as a huge opportunity for us.
What are some of you guys' thoughts around that? I know, John?
I mean, you see it all the time with businesses, big and small, where they, a lot of times, they'll get sold a tool that claims to be a silver bullet, or maybe they are more savvy and they know what they want and they buy it, but then they stand it up, they implement it, and they'll either leave it as a default config or they'll take the time to configure it the first time around, but then, like he was saying, not have the budget to have a staff to be maintaining the tool properly. It's a huge problem in the industry. Security costs money, so figuring out how to allocate your resources properly to make the most out of them is definitely very important. And I think this particular topic, using the tools you have effectively is such a huge win for any business, right? Because you've already spent the money, you have the tool in place, it serves a purpose, it serves a function. You want to make sure that you're utilizing it to the best of your ability, and that is a huge opportunity from a services and sales standpoint.
And I think the reason why you see organizations that suffer with the orchestration piece of security pivoting towards MSPs or MSSPs is because of that need for personnel to be on staff to handle the security portions or the networking portions of their environment, because in the SMB space, you're so small or you're not large enough yet to give or allocate cost to those things. And that is, I think, one of the reasons why mindset or change needs to take place, in that it's an investment, right? The reason an organization might need to hire an administrator or a team to handle a tool would be the right motive. And that's also partly why these organizations need to partner with those on the phone call that can help them with this, because they've been in the trenches for so long doing this. They've been handling it for other customers. They can be a trusted partner in their security practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly.
Great point.
So I guess
One thing that goes oftentimes missed, I mean, if we asked, if you're a company that has multiple security devices, each was implemented individually and independently, and yet none of them took into account the other security devices, just about everybody would raise their hand. So if you think about that, especially from an orchestration standpoint, when your employees don't communicate with each other, you already know that's a very bad thing. Well, that's very true of your security devices as well. So as you are implementing or changing the security devices that you have, you essentially need to tune the system so that they're all working together to give you greater visibility on what's happening on your network.
Yeah.
Well, and even more so with those devices in place, who's monitoring that data, if anything?
Yeah. Assuming you do get the configuration set up properly.
Yep.
That's step one. And then the real fun begins of actually watching it and dealing with issues as they arise.
So I'm curious, what are some measures that you guys have taken in the past to be able to evaluate whether or not an appliance or a security solution that's been deployed into a customer's environment for you guys is doing what it's supposed to be doing? What are those first kinds of steps that you guys take?
I guess I would say that we actually always like to do an assessment first, just because going into an environment like that, touching a bunch of security related stuff is kind of, we always like to, get a good grasp of what we're trying to do first before we kind of go in there and do anything.
So when you say assessments, are you talking like vulnerability assessments? Are you talking pen tests? Or are you talking general security posture assessments? What kind of assessments are you guys leading with?
From my side, we lead with a security posture assessment, and then we can actually go into looking at vulnerabilities, pen testing from there. That actually seems to be the best way to approach it that we found.
And what are some of the commonalities that you see amongst all the different end customers that you serve in terms of either appliances that have been misconfigured or systems that were supposed to be on that weren't even plugged into the network? What are some of the commonalities that you're seeing?
The biggest commonality we'd have to see across the industry is people are either understaffed or just undertrained at what they're doing. They don't have a good grasp on what they're doing, or, like I said, they're probably doing 100 other things, and they just have to hit like a little bit of security, related stuff throughout the month or whatnot. And they end up just not knowing, misconfiguring it, just not properly knowing the capabilities of the system is actually one of the hugest things we see out there. So,
and that's the unfortunate part, right?
Exactly.
Because that's what leads to the manifestations of breaches. Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, but it's not only misconfiguration, but perhaps under-configuration. So if someone is overly constrained on time, they're not going to try to use all the features or capabilities of a product, because if they get it wrong, they're going to have to go back and fix it. So more often than not, they will default to, least complicated functionality, so that it's less likely they'll have to come back and improve it, which means you may have additional security capability within the organization, but your staff is either ill-trained or underconfident in implementing some of those security measures.
Well, and I think that part of the reason for that too is vendors try and create one appliance that does all the things. And so then you end up having to know how to configure an IDS, IPS, a firewall, a HIDS solution all in one. And because of that, you just try and get your base configuration in so that you can check off on the project management side of things that task has been completed and you move on.
Goes back to that silver bullet approach like you were talking about. There is no one size fits all.
What about some, just to kind of shift gears a little bit, what are some of the tools that you guys are seeing out there? What are you seeing as far as being able to uncover vulnerabilities with being able to see the actual configurations? I know, and I didn't really do a good job of when I kicked this call off, everyone on this call are penetration testers, either they're blue team or red team guys, and have a ton of experience in the hacking space from a penetration perspective. So you guys can really talk about the tools that are out there, what hackers are actually doing, and what they have visibility into into those devices. So touch a little bit on that.
Well, from a red team perspective, default configurations, passwords, default passwords, commonly used passwords, not monitoring the traffic. Like I said, they got the data coming in, but they don't know how to monitor it. So I'm in the network doing stuff, but nobody's watching me doing what I'm doing.
As a red teamer, though, are there any specific tools or vendor products that help in uncovering those things?
That's more of a blue team question, buddy.
But I mean, when you guys are doing your assessments, though, when you're trying to find those things out.
Outside of just using regular open source tools, Nmap, scanners, Nessus, stuff like that. I mean, that's the general tools that we use.
Well, yeah, I think what a lot of it is if you've gotten through the door through a brute force, right, then it becomes a manual assessment, so to speak, right? You have to actually go in and see what a configuration is. So, like in assessments that I've done, if I've gotten into a core networking equipment, right, through a brute force attack, one of the things is I'll copy over a local running config of that router to see, or that switch to see maybe what types of VLANs they have in place, what types of hosts are being assigned, what types of IPs, and evaluate the configuration from that standpoint, because that's concrete information that you can use to evaluate. Most automated scanners that go out and look for that type of analysis can be prone to false negatives and false positives, which won't help anyone. And that's why you kind of have to dig in and truly either capture the configs or have the customer or organization you're partnering with for the assessment provide you those configs. And more often than not, a lot of organizations and institutions would be willing to provide you that, just given the fact that it's going to help them.
So at the end of the day, you're saying don't rely so much on tools, but actually take the time and make it more of a human process.
Well, I think so. I think you would agree with that from a blue teamer's perspective, right?
Absolutely.
So more often than not, everyone says, oh, just replace your SOC with this AI-driven SOC and you'll be good. It'll catch all the things.
Exactly.
But more often than not, do we see all these next-gen solutions with AI integration deployed into environments and miss common, scripting measures and techniques that are and simulate user activity and living off land measures.
Absolutely.
So that's why it's like it's a teeter-totter, so to speak, on how to do the evaluation. I'm curious to hear how their teams do the evaluation as well, whether they have tools that are provided in their own kit or if they actually go and drill into the configurations themselves.
Darren, how do you guys approach it?
We actually do the same. We actually, I like to get into the configs first, and then we're able to just kind of get in the rest of the data from there that we kind of like to dig into. We just see like a lot of people's systems just not getting them the data that they need, like alerting back to them that there's like possible, injection attacks going on or something like that. Someone trying to inject some code into some of their websites. And it's just good to be able to show it to people, businesses. It really opens up their eyes that this stuff is happening like all day, every day, while you're sleeping, while you're awake, while you're driving to work. So you can't be there while this, you can't know everything. You can't be in front of it. But with the right set of tools, with the right set of alerts going on, you can get a good idea of what's going on and prevent this from happening. So.
Well, that's part of that tuning, right? Because the solutions you have integrated into your environment are going to be as effective as the rule sets you give them. So, what are some of those common things that you look for in environments for a baseline of these are good rule sets and these are good standards to apply in your infrastructure and in your security tools to make sure that they're at least capturing what they should critically?
We're seeing like a lot of edge devices not properly configured. Like you see like a lot of firewalls just sitting out there with their IPSs running, but nothing is happening with that IPS data. Nothing is, they're not, they're not transferring it back and forth with Cisco. So, they're not getting that into we're a big Cisco factory. So we kind of like to push that stuff. And, with those FTDs and the FMCs, you can push that data right into the Cisco cloud. You can use things like the threat response to really get a good idea, like a visualization on where your attacks are coming from, what it's actually trying to do, what it's trying to execute, the ingress, egress ways it got into your network. So it's just really good visualization tools, and to be able to show that to a customer, it's really eye-opening to them.
Right.
And we take it kind of for granted because we see it every day, and we're like, oh, these are like the tools we use, and this is happening. But like, there's a good chunk of I think about 90% of the people out there have no idea that this is happening on a daily basis, just all day, every day, all night. So.
Well, yeah, I think what's the most interesting thing is when John and I started working together, one of the environments John used to be in, there was a senior security engineer that gaffed at the fact that attacks could be scripted. He thought everything had to be manually done and probes had to be done manually, and that there aren't just this idea of bots out on the network.
I blew his mind that day.
Yeah. That's the fact that there can be machines using scripts to automatically do a lot of this stuff.
Well, and I think kind of to jump off to another point based on that, though, we were talking before the call about, it's a big step for companies to begin this process and do these types of evaluations, but a lot of companies make the mistake of doing it once and being done, thinking that they're going to, patch all the things and then be good, instead of treating it as a cyclical, continuous process. So, do the assessment, do your patching, do your configurations, and then start the process over again, because there's going to be more, potentially things you missed. There's going to be new threats in the landscape that you need to worry about. Maybe you implemented a new tool.
Yeah.
Maybe you expanded your network. There's all sorts of things that you need to consider. And yeah, that's why you need to make it a regular cyclical process. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, when I was on the consulting side of the house here at Tech Data, one of the things I constantly drove was assessments need to be done quarterly, testing needs to be done annually, and then if you are going to be making large shifts in your infrastructure and in your environment, you need to do a test afterwards to validate that what you've changed or what you've integrated is doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Yes. Yep. Here.
Yep.
Another thing we've seen is we actually see a lot of out there is that when this stuff happens, no one has a good incident response plan to handle it, especially in the SMB market where this, you just don't have the staff to handle it. Like in the larger market where you have, the bigger companies, you have dedicated analysts. It's really, this is their job. But for anything smaller than that, it seems like no one really has like a very good incident response plan in place, know what to do when certain events happen. So it's good to actually work with a customer to also develop that kind of stuff.
That's a great point.
Do you guys work in that space? Like, if something does, hit the fan on a customer and their firewall's being breached, do they have a number to call? Do they have something, somebody they can get in contact with to help them?
If they are part of our MSSP, yes.
Okay.
If you're not, we'd like to bring you on as part of our MSSP, I guess I would say. So.
Yeah, I think IR is, everyone for so long, when we were walking around the pond, we were talking about this the other day. For so long, many organizations focused on prevention. And prevention was the biggest thing and biggest drive of many different vendors, that if you could just prevent, if you just integrated this solution, it would prevent. And no one thought about, or they crossed their fingers and toes and hoped for, they would never need response. And so because of that, it became a little bit of a niche in that it costs so much to respond to different events, different incidents of different types, and then many customers and personnel aren't fully enabled to know how to respond to an active and ongoing breach.
Yep.
And so I think the response portion is just as critical as the prevention and monitoring pieces, because you have to prepare for the inevitable.
Yeah, people need to get their head out of the sand. That a lot of businesses think that it happened to the other guy, but it won't happen to me. Who cares on the internet, what bad guy is going to care about my business when, half the time it might not be somebody, it might just be a bot that pops one of their routers and game over.
Or they're sold something that says that would prevent this type of thing, and I'm sorry, prevention, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get in. It just depends on how long it takes you to detect me and to figure out what I did and mitigate from what I did.
Right.
Well, a lot of people also don't take into account that a lot of breaches are actually just a Dialahack. I mean, quite literally, you can write a bot that simply says, "What's out there? What are you?" And they can figure out what those are, including the device and the firmware version that's running. And they can go query a database. There are several databases online that says, "What is this thing vulnerable to?" And then they can simply deploy that attack against this target that they randomly discovered. And so now you're breached. This is something that there was no human involved. A piece of software says, "What are you?" It says, "Hey, I'm XYZ version 2.0," and it says, "Oh yeah, cool. Here's an attack." Bam, and then now they're on. And what's funny is they get notified that says, "Hey, I just broke into this thing. What do you want me to do?" And so now you'll get a human looking at this, going, "Oh, what is this thing? And I've just broken into."
Great point.
Scary thought, but it's true.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or it goes back to what you've talked about in the past, where you're doing stuff and it comes across at an MSSP and they just think, "Oh, it's a false positive. Oh, it's a network card not acting right."
Well, and that goes hand in hand with even your own MSSP and your own SOC needs to constantly be training against the latest attack vectors, the latest tactics, techniques, and procedures that are being used out in the wild, because many tier 1 analysts and even tier 2 engineers don't truly know what an ongoing exfiltration of data might look like. They don't know that user agent that's reporting as rogue in the SIM, although this is one of my favorite stories, although it says Windows in it, it's not Windows. It's something else. And if you dig deeper into it and you look at standard user agents and you do your investigation, and I think this is what's part of the piece and part of the puzzle here, is you have to go beyond just the alert notification and throw it back over the fence and let somebody else handle it. It's the reason why a lot of these small businesses and smaller mid-sized businesses go to MSSPs and go to MSPs, is because they're looking for someone to provide them with advice, to give them and help them along with as things are occurring in their environment. And this is where organizations also need to realize that they didn't just get a SOC to check a box. They got a SOC to handle a piece and portion of their business that they couldn't invest time and money into for their own personnel. So they have to work hand in hand together collaboratively to make sure that the SOC is getting just as much as they need from the customer as the customer is getting from the SOC. And that's where it goes hand in hand. I mean, sure, John has several stories where customers could have been better with their SOC in handling different alerts and alarms and different ongoing issues in their environments, but instead would just pass it along or not respond, or it would just go to an inbox that no one was monitoring.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very sad reality.
And that is really what goes into operational management and even the orchestration piece, is that you have to make sure you have identified those critical points of contact, both with inside of your organization and outside, that are working together hand in hand to fulfill the same goal. Because you went into that MSSP not only as an insurance policy, but as someone that's going to help you fight the fire when the fire starts.
But you also have to keep them apprised of your network.
Exactly. You have to keep them up to date. There's no reason to hide things. Like this, that's one of the things that is very, very astonishing, I think, within this space, is that everyone has for so often become siloed and has been keeping things to themselves. Like we were on an assessment, for example, where we were working to evaluate and benchmark an MSSP's incident response capabilities and benchmark their SOC. And when we were asking them about their correlations and rule sets and things that they were using for triggers, alerts, and alarms in the SIM, they told us that that was proprietary information and were unwilling to give that to us. Here's the thing, it's not proprietary information. There's standards from both the Homeland Security and DHS of common rule sets and correlation rules you have to use in a SIM and in your SOC to make sure you're at least seeing what you should be.
Yeah.
I think a huge part of it comes down to trust, and that both the customer should make efforts to establish trust with the MSSP and definitely vice versa. Because, like Josh was saying, if information gets siloed, if that communication breaks down, if the proper logs aren't being sent, if the proper access isn't given to the analyst, to the incident responders, you're just tying your own hands behind your back and making life hard for everybody. And it's, at the end of the day, going to cost everybody more money.
Yeah. And trust isn't something you just establish once. It's an ongoing relationship.
It goes back to being cyclical, right?
Yeah.
Security is a circle.
All right. Well, I think we're coming up on the 30 minutes. Just to kind of wrap this up, anyone want to make a last minute comment, just to add anything that just came to mind that you think is important to interject before we wrap up?
Yeah, real quick. This is Ryan from Monreal. A lot of great comments and things. And one of the other challenges that I just kind of wanted to bring up that I think is very important is that, a lot of times when we're going and talking to the end user or client about this stuff, like a lot of technical, great information has been given today on the call. And I don't want to lose sight that a lot of times our challenge is us giving that technical experience business relevance. What are the assets we're trying to protect? What are the risks? Because a lot of these guys sometimes that we're talking to don't understand, some of the red team, blue team, and all the incidents and stuff that we've been talking about. So I from the beginning and to Darren's point and some of the other guys on the call, I think it's really important that we start with that assessment and walk them down the path of why that's so important and what we are specifically trying to protect and why it is a long-term play, the management of it and why it makes sense to come alongside them and help them in the endeavor. Like you said, a lot of times the guys see it, they see the shiny tool, put it in place, and in their mind they're protected. But it's because the expectations aren't set and the realities that, just the before doesn't get it done. It's during and after, the attacks, because these, the rapid pace of this hacker network and the resources that they have available is huge right now. So, just from our standpoint, we always try to do as good a job as we can of really trying to walking them down the path, and to Darren's point, talking about an incident response plan, and is that communicated throughout the company and stuff like that, so we can kind of set the table up for walking them down everything that you guys have been talking about. So
awesome.
Do you base that on a business approach or a risk approach to an individual small business or medium-sized business? Is that how you do that, or how you justify that?
A lot of times, yeah, because, he's got to feel, if it's the owner, CEO, or if there's a small group of people, if it's a medium-sized business, I mean, they got to really see the business impact or the relevance if they're going to spend the money and budget some kind of tools like that to protect themselves. And in order to do that, we often find if they don't understand what are the assets or what are the risks that they're leaving themselves vulnerable to if they don't do it, they're just simply they're not going to buy the tools, or they're not going to take the time to invest in having them managed properly.
And I just want to back you up with a there. So the bad guys are outspending the good guys 10-1. So if you're a small business out there, whatever you're spending, the bad guys are spending 10 times more than you to break you versus you protecting yourself. So ask yourself the question: am I going to win a war where I'm being outspent 10-1? And if you're rational, you're going to say probably not. And therefore, you're going to have to get your game together. You either have to spend 10 times more on security, or you really need to get organized on the things that you are doing.
Yeah, great point.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, I just want to wrap it up. I want to say thank you to Monreal Consulting, awesome IT company out of Ohio, and appreciate you guys being one of our key security partners. So Darren and Ryan, thank you for being on the call, and thanks to everyone else that was on this call, and look forward to next month's call on 30 Minutes with the Hacker.